No. Used to give a negative answer or reply to a question, request, or offer. No matter what age.
Hey, Val? Val, no.
No matter what language.
Нет. Nein.
No one likes to be told no.
No! No!
Can public procurement professionals say no and yet remain true to our mission statements without compromising our values and guiding principles? Yes, we can, and with a smile on our face. Find out how you can soften the no with this month's Radio NIGP.
Coming to you with another episode of Hot Topics with my colleagues Don Buffum and Kevin Yin. And this month's theme is on the subject of no, or how to say no. And Kevin, how have you handled this situation in your agency in the past?
Thank you, Dave. So for me, I've actually have eliminated the word no from my lexicon. But let me give you why, how this all came about. So whenever I had conversations with customers, their number one complaint to us is typically somehow they see us as a gatekeeper. We're the department of no's, right? And in essence, when that happens, it starts with a negative connotation. But during one of our NIGP forums, there was a gentleman that actually came to us and spoke. I want to say it's one of the plenary sessions, and he was the message from him was how to create a want-to environment, and it was for our employees, right? How do we create an environment where our employees want to come to work every day, right? Where they want to be productive, where they want to communicate, where they want to do great things for our organizations. And so from there, I started thinking, well, how do I create a want-to environment for our customers, right? Because they're seeing us as that hurdle or that hoop that they have to jump through. How do we create that want-to environment for them? And so I thought, well, the first thing that we could probably do maybe is stop saying no, right? Be a collaborative partner in all of this. And so just like what I do for my team, not telling them no and then giving them options in terms of how to approach whatever topic, right? And so I started testing that on my customers, and then developed a way to actually have that conversation, have an open dialogue with our customers. And so for example, if a customer were to come to me and say, "Hey, Kevin, can I buy from my cousin?" Right? And I mean, the very first thing that pops to my mind, my head, and probably yours, right, is no. Are you nuts, right? But it's really hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It takes some practice. It's hard to say no. It's hard to not say no. But so I've learned to say, yes, you can do that, right? I always try to start with the word yes, because yes opens up their mind to thinking a little bit more. So I would say, yes, you could do that, but here are the consequences associated with that, right? And so, as I said, so I usually will add something to the effect if it's something this egregious. If this work is your bread and butter, right? You rely on this type of work, and you happen to hear that your city has just made a purchase. You know, someone in the organization made a purchase from their cousin or their family members or whatever. How would you feel about that? right? And their response would be like, not so great, right? But in addition to that, I usually will add, here are some other options. Have you just for your consideration, right? Or have you thought about these other options? We have a list of contracts that are available for you to use. We have Google that we can search to see who are the players in the marketplace, right? We can do some phone calls, do a competitive process, utilize the tools that we have to get to the contracts that they need, right? And so, Don, what have you done in your organization?
Kevin, I just totally agree with what you just said. I know that, I don't know, I've probably read it someplace, but I think when the word no basically puts up a barrier in communications. And that's, of course, the last thing we want with our clients. I've always really looked at it as I don't want, when people think of procurement office, if they think, oh man, I don't want to go there, they're a roadblock, they'll tell me no, I can't do it, then we've missed our calling. We're failing on the job. I want them to think, purchasing, they'll help me figure out how to do this. And I kind of look at us like a GPS, you tell me where you are today and where you want to go, and I'll tell you the best way to get there without going down the wrong way on a one-way street or running red lights or any of those things that will get you in trouble, because that's my job, is to help navigate and get you where do you want to be. So I can't say that I never say no, because I have. There's some pretty headstrong people around here, and sometimes you just have, the only word they understand is no. But I totally appreciate your concept, and I'll give it a little bit more of an effort in the future.
How did Kevin, how did your employees take to that at first? What did they think you were crazy?
So there's a number of ways that, just like you all, the first time you heard me say this, it was like, that's impossible, right? There's no way we can not just use the word no, because customers, they need to know, they need to do the right thing. And sometimes they come to us with such crazy ideas. And so what I tried to sell to my staff, my team, is remember that the ultimate goal is to create a want-to environment for our customers, right? If they don't feel like that we're being helpful, if they see us as a roadblock, right? If they don't feel like we add value, and even so, let's say we add value, but we don't create a good experience for them, right? They're not going to come to us. They're going to be reluctant to come to us each and every time. So just the same way that I have created in a different environment, hopefully you feel that way in our workspace, right? I want to create that want-to environment for you. And correct me, you can be my accountability partner. If I ever say no to you, call me out on it, right? Because I don't want to do that, because I want to make sure that I want to create that want-to environment. You get up in the morning, you want to come to work because it's such a fun place, a great place to get to make a difference in this world. Yeah. And so the same thing goes for our customers. And so they come to us because we add value. We create a good experience for them. How do we do that better, right? And so in addition to getting the work done, how do we make them feel? And so by using that word no, which creates that negative connotation up front, that in itself put people off. And so, and some will say, I definitely I cannot not use the word no. And so, and for those listening out there that have been in my classes, I know some of you have really tried, and some have actually sent me an email or called me up and say, I didn't say no, but I did tell them that I can't say yes yet. Yeah. So that's okay too. Gives you time to think about it, right?
Interesting way to put it. Okay, well, thanks for the insight on that, and you're right. Don and I kind of looked at you askance when you first brought this up. So, okay, well, thanks for joining us out there in NIGP land, and join us again next month when hopefully we'll have another interesting hot topic for you to digest. Thanks for being with us. Take care.
Greetings, viewers. In this month's Legally Speaking, we're going to discuss when lawyers say no, or more accurately, how lawyers are likely to answer your question. I'm joined by my partner, Mike Beavis, and we're going to start with the, I suppose, unsurprising confession that when people within our own organizations come to us with yes or no questions, as lawyers, we often respond with, it depends. Everybody's heard that. And it's not because we're wishy-washy. It's because really we've been trained to look at everything from all the different angles and go through an analytical process to give a helpful answer. Now, there's different kinds of questions that procurement professionals might present to their legal counsel. One category is sort of questions about interpretation, like interpretation of statutory laws and written regulations. And there you're trying to clearly understand what the words actually mean and don't mean. And the path of analysis for addressing those kind of questions, frankly, it's largely influenced by case law that comes out of the courts. And of course, courts vary across North America, but they often dictate some of the methodologies to use, or they provide rules of thumb for how to interpret the words that are on the page. As an insider newsflash, by the way, NIGP is right now developing a new advanced course on legislation and legal environment, and it gets into all that, including questions of interpretation. But there's a related category of questions that Mike and I want to talk about now, and that's when a client wants to actually do something, take an action, and they ask the legal folks, hey, can I do this? Now, when lawyers analyze about a question about whether someone may or should do something, it, I think, always starts with, is there authority that allows you to do this? Don't you think, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that takes us right back to like the statutes and the rules and the policies, and a lawyer's going to be looking for, are you allowed to do this? Do you have the authority to do this? If they conclude that there is no authority, that's when you get one of those hard stop no answers from somebody. Sometimes it's right on the borderline, and there is some professional judgment that goes into it, but most authority questions can be answered one way or the other. Now, if there is authority, meaning one could take the action, well, then everybody can move on to consider whether one should actually take the action. And that analysis is kind of a two-part thing. The first part is where everyone does a traditional risk management analysis, and they'll use tools like the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, the SWOT analysis, and you use other brainstorming techniques. And in traditional risk management, people often will do a little quadrant thing, and they'll look for you'll brainstorm what could possibly go wrong. And then you sort those things out and you say, if it did happen, is it going to be low severity or really high severity? And you also look on the other axis and you say, is it likely to happen or unlikely to happen? And so you can sort things out that way. Once you've gone through that risk management analysis, then a lawyer is probably also going to start thinking about, if one of these things happen, if one of these risks actually occurs, or in the worst case scenario, how could I defend this? Could I defend you if you decide to take the action? So that's kind of some of the parts about it.
Yeah, I agree, John, and that's how I've experienced it. And one of the things I look for is that lawyer who's willing to say, okay, this is the situation. Now it's your decision to make the choice, right? They give me an informed batch of information and they let me make a choice. The ones that frustrate me the most, as both a former lawyer who's now practicing procurement, right, is those who want to make the decision, the business decision for me, right?
The lawyers,
I want my lawyer to tell me yes or no from the authority perspective. and then maybe help me sound out the business decision, but not to make it, right? And generally speaking, a lawyer's ethics would say you inform your client and then your client makes their own business decision, right? And hopefully you'll defend them in that decision, whatever it is, as you said. Sometimes I think the lawyers think that we're not their client, but the people are, or some other bigger group is. And so they say, well, you can't do that because it wouldn't be the most cost-effective way to get to the end. And the answer is, well, that's not your job. Your job isn't to be most cost-effective. That's my job, right? I define value, you define legality. So I have those conversations all the time, and it depends sometimes on the personality of your lawyer, right? Like I have some lawyers who want to make the business decisions because they like making them. In fact, I was one of them, right? I used to represent clients in this area, and I wanted to make the business decision and make the mess and let my lawyers clean it up for me. But as a lawyer, I couldn't. So I quit practicing law and became a purchasing agent, right? Because now I can make the decision and make the mess and turn to the lawyers to help me fix it, right?
So what
But
have you
sometimes-
learned from all that? What kind of strategies have you thought about, or what do you use, or what do you advise other people to do when they're in that sort of situation?
So what I do is what's called opinion shopping. So it depends on whether you have outside counsel or inside counsel, right? And then it depends on how things are assigned with your inside counsel, if that's what you have. So right now I have some lawyers I prefer to work with because they'll say, what do you want to do? I'll help you figure out how to do it. I have other lawyers who say, well, you can't do that. That's not what the law says. And so depending on what's happening, I want one lawyer or the other to give me the answer. Sometimes I go to the lawyers wanting them to say no, so I can come back and say, well, they told me no, what can I do? Right? Sometimes I want the lawyer to work with me to find a yes, because we need a yes, right? So it's all about what you need and how you work it. And for me, opinion shopping has always been a question of relationship and how you manage that that relationship with your representation, whether they're inside your organization, like we have city attorneys, or whether they're outside, like contracted counsel. Outside counsel will tend to be more in their lane and less likely to make a business judgment and demand it of you. Inside counsel sometimes can get very committed to the success of their program, right? And they see the organization as their program, so they don't want to make it. They want to make the right decision, and that's a good thing. But sometimes it's not the legal decision they're making. So this idea of being aware of your lawyer's tendencies, because as you started, you said, the first thing we look at is to see whether it's authorized. And that's that old principle that we always have to go back for, the difference between public sector procurement and private sector procurement. In the private sector, you can do anything that's not illegal. In the public sector, you have to have authority to do whatever you're doing, right? And that's really the key, is when the lawyer says you don't have authority to do something, then you're taking a personal action, right? And it's personal liability on the line. It's like, you don't want to do that, right? But if they can find the authority, then the question of should is usually a business decision. And that's where I do that shopping sometimes.
I love all that. It occurs to me that I'm in the same sorts of situations where I sometimes get different kinds of answers from lawyers. But it's also, I think, incumbent upon us as procurement professionals, right, to know what to do with the answers that they give us. And so if we get a yes from one and a no from the other, well, whose responsibility is it in the end?
Right. And it's yours. It belongs to you. You're making the business judgment, right? So at the end of the day, it's yours. And the question of authority is theirs. And the question of the preferred language in the contract will be theirs ultimately, right? Because that's the legal thing. But the business judgment remains ours. So
that seems like it's a good bottom line for this discussion. It's nice to know what you might expect from working with counsel, and it's nice to know what your responsibilities are ultimately in that situation. That sounds great to me, Mike. Should we say goodbye for this month and talk to folks next month?
I agree. I think it's time to say goodbye and let people get on with making their business judgments.
Very good. See you in March.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Hello, I'm Barb Johnson with Radio NIGP, and I'm honored today to be interviewing Ken Kester, past president of the NIGP board, past treasurer of the NIGP, and also a past Albert H. Hall Memorial Award recipient. Ken, welcome, and by way of introduction, could you please share a brief statement about where you worked and how you started in public procurement?
Well, I started at the University of Cincinnati in 1980 or 81, I think it was. And I started off as a buyer's assistant and just working on three-way matches, processing invoices, learning about bid bonds, things like that. A very entry-level position. I did that for 3 or 4 years, I believe it was. And then from there, I went to Northern Kentucky University. I was hired as a senior buyer, and I didn't know a thing about procurement. I had a spec. I didn't know a general condition from a special condition, but I got hired, and I worked there. But I did learn from one of the best people I've ever met in purchasing, Mr. Keith Stewart. And after that, I was there for 17 years. And following that time, I went to Hamilton County Educational Service Center as the director of the Unified Purchasing Cooperative and served in that capacity for 17 years as a full-time employee and 2 years as a consultant. And then for this past year, I've been retired.
That's great. That's great. Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Based on your experience in procurement then and now, what do you think are the biggest changes in public procurement that occurred?
Well, I think there are two. And the first one is, I think, is the most obvious one, and that is technology. Technology has advanced from when I started early 1980s to when I left. It's going to continue to advance. When I first started in NKU as a buyer, I found a picture not too long ago and had a picture of me at a desk with a phone and a calculator. Well, now you'll have multiple computers and all kinds of stuff on the desk. And the other thing I think that we need to see happen is we need to get more people involved in certification. And I think that's one thing. Those two things, I think, are what's changed a lot. And I think and they both should keep changing and keep evolving. We need to get, like I said, more people if not certified, in the pipeline to get certified.
Very good. And what do you think was the most important lessons that you learned during your career that you would pass on to our current public procurement professionals and those who want to be?
I think there's two you have to look at. The first one is, if you're not an ethical person, you have no business being in public procurement. You're dealing with billions, and not each one of us, but in total, we deal with billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars. And if you can't be ethical in how you treat vendors and you can't do things the right way, you have no business being in public procurement. And the other thing, you need to treat people with respect. I think I found out a long time ago, and I think you need to respect not only the vendors, I think you need to respect internal customers and everybody else that you come in contact with, because if you don't, it's going to be, you have a long road to hoe. But anyway, so if you have to be ethical and you have to treat people with respect, those are two things I think you need.
Wonderful. I agree with that too. And so, Ken, even though it's been a little while, but if you could start all over again, would you choose public procurement? Why or why not?
Well, What I didn't tell you at the beginning when I was working at the University of Cincinnati is that I started out in the student accounts department, and I dealt with their charging credit system. So I had to, my job was to research all the past due debts of students at the university going back ad infinitum. And that was my job for 2 years, 3 years. And then after that point, we got married, and so we had to do a little bit better, make some more money. So I took a test in a not a classified civil service. You have grades and steps. And you may know this as well, being from Ohio State, that once you get to the top of your step, you go through all your steps, you pretty much grade it out. So you have to get advancement, you have to go to another grade. So I took the test to go to another grade, and I did well on the test, but the only position open at the time was procurement in the purchasing department. So I took it, and that's how I got it. I became a buyer's assistant. Like I said, I learned about three-way matches and processing invoices and working with bonds and that. So it wasn't that I set out to be in purchasing. Purchasing fell into my lap, or I fell into purchasing, I should say. Mm-hmm. And but like I said, if I had to choose when I was younger, I was in high school, to pick a profession, knowing what I know now, I would have picked public procurement. It's been a fantastic career. It's been a fantastic learning experience. And more than that, I met some really fantastic people, you included.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel the same way. Our NIGP family and public procurement colleagues are wonderful. And you have been such a wonderful mentor and contributor, paying it forward for years. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And Ken, is there anything in closing you'd like to mention?
I would recommend it. I would almost insist that anybody with any kind of buying responsibility start becoming certified. And that means I would probably, in a new buyer, I would have them take general, for the lack of a better one, general public procurement course, and then go to the intermediate and advanced. I know there's different courses now, but that's how I would start that on. Not so much that they got certified, which I think they should, but get them on the path to certification. Because once you get in the path, I think inevitably you will probably see the benefits of it and want to continue on to get certified. Because like I said, we deal with so much money, so many funding, billions of dollars, that we should have the best people we can get and the most talented and the most qualified people we can get to handle that money and do that job, because we have a very important job to do for this country.
Well stated. And thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Marvin, and likewise. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Boston.
All right. Thanks.
Greetings. Welcome to February Tech Talk with Stephanie and Christy. February's radio NIGP theme is softening the no. So how does that tie into Tech Talk? In all procurement offices, agents are asked to procure something, sometimes technology, with a very short turnaround time. Sometimes the turnaround time is too short to reasonably be able to solicit the items, but sometimes you can utilize a piggyback or a bridge. With technology procurements, this is often not an option because the specifications don't exactly fit for your jurisdiction, or your jurisdiction may not be allowed to participate in that type of contract. So how does a procurement office make a technology purchase in a short time frame? This is an unfortunate and all too frequent occurrence.
It is important to remember that with technology procurement, especially software as a service, that the entity's currency is their data. Once data has been entrusted to a software provider, the entity must be certain that the risk to the currency or data is minimized. The minimization of risk often takes negotiations with the software company, and they are frequently lengthy. So, is there a way to soften the no when it comes to technology procurements? Often there may not be. Data that is not properly protected may by negotiated agreements with software vendors could lead to disastrous results. Sometimes, even with the best negotiated agreements, data can be compromised or lost. For example, recently, Kronos was compromised with 800,000 customers. The amount of data entrusted to Kronos was massive. So why didn't Kronos honor their agreements and have disaster recovery as stated in their agreements? And did any of their customers know that their data was not being backed up? How many of those customers were performing the contract management to understand the risk of the data?
So sadly, this is a time when procurement agents must say no. However, this can be followed, or that no can be followed with some ideas to assist the end user in obtaining the technology that they need. But the timing may be longer than the client expected. Procurement agents can work within the agency to develop a BATNA, or a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And this may speed the procurement process of software a little, but this arrangement too has its risks. The agency has to determine where it's going to draw its lines or boundaries, and as such, it may cause a breakdown in the negotiations, which result in that contract no longer being able to be awarded.
Since data is the currency and it's so imperative to protect it, is there anything that can be done to speed up the process and allow the procurement to say no or no but on a less frequent basis? Some jurisdictions do large contracts for various types of hosted custom commercial off-the-shelf products. This type of proactive contracting may reduce the number of denials for technology procurements. However, with customized software or sole source software, the issue is once again put to procurement to gain the technology with reduced risk or loss of data on a short timeline.
Unfortunately, this may result in a hard no. Remember, the procurement agent has the obligation to protect the entity from risk, and data is the currency of most technology procurements. Protecting the agent's data is more important than saying yes. As always, the best recommendation to avoid hearing no is to do strategic planning and involve procurement in your discussions of acquisitions from the very beginning. This practice will not just soften the no, but potentially eliminate it altogether. Thanks for tuning in, and we can't wait to tech talk to you in March.
See you later.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kirk Buffington with Radio NIGP. Today, we thought we would bring forward to you a great resource that's available to you on the NIGP website. And that resource is called Global Best Practices. To find the global best practices, you simply go to nigp.org, click on Our Profession, and then they sublink to Global Best Practices. Now, the purpose of the Global Best Practices is to provide to you, the members, another document that will help you better your profession and better the way you may be doing things at your agency. So how are these global best practices created? Well, first, NIGP recognizes that there may be a need for something. For instance, the best way of conducting an RFP, and that is one of the global best practices. So NIGP brings together a task force of usually 4 to 7 people, 4 to 7 members, who then start creating a global best practice on RFPs. Now, the task force is very diverse for a very good reason, to bring different perspectives to the document, both globally diverse and agency diverse. There may be a city, a county, a school board, a state, all of those types of things to bring as much perspective, as many different perspectives as possible. So once this group comes together, they meet for 4 to 5 months creating that global best practice. Now, that isn't the end of it. They're not just created and then put out there on the web. They're vetted 2 times over. First, that original draft document is vetted by 50 to 65 members who have experience in a particular type of endeavor, such as RFPs. They'll go through it in great depth. They'll make recommendations. They may suggest changes. They may disagree with things. They'll go through it. It comes back to the task force. Those changes and recommendations are either accepted or not. Once that is finalized, it is published as a public document for comments, very similar to what the federal government does when they issue new rules and regulations through the regulatory divisions and departments of the federal government. The membership as a whole has 2 weeks to make comments on the document. They come back to the task force, it's finalized, and then it's published as a global best practice. Occasionally, the task force may choose to even conduct a webinar about the new global best practice. We've done that. I've been on 3 of these global best practice task forces, and on one of them, we created a negotiation global best practice, and we actually conducted a webinar about it. So it's a great resource if you're considering doing something different at your agency. This document may help you make that fight to upper management about why it's a good way to go. So we hope you find them helpful. We hope you find them beneficial. And again, nigp.org, click on our profession, and then the sublink for global best practices. Thank you, and see you again later.
Hi, everybody. I'm Keith Glatz, and welcome to Way to Grow. Now, I produce this segment every month to demonstrate the best way to grow in our profession. And today, we've got a real grown-up with us. Joining me today is Barb Johnson, who's a former procurement practitioner. She's a current NIGP instructor, a well-known thought leader and mentor. And Barb is also a fellow of NIGP. She's an FNIGP, which means she won the most recent Albert H. Hall Memorial Award. And nobody's more deserving than Barb, I'll tell you. And because of her great renown, Barb gets asked a whole lot of questions in her various roles. And this month, we've been talking about softening or saying no. So, Barb, what happens when you say no?
Thank you, Keith, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I've enjoyed working with you over the years and enjoyed your leadership also. So, softening the no. We're often put in a position where maybe we first have a knee-jerk reaction, and in the back of our minds, we're saying, oh boy, oh no. And I do get asked a lot of questions, understanding that in some cases, some people will quote me in the future and say, well, Barb Johnson said, or one of the leaders at NIGP said. And so when you're even representing yourself or you're affiliated with the Institute, you want to be sure that your approach is instructive and useful. And when you say no, just out of hand, that totally cuts down the conversation. It totally stops it. I like to use what they actually teach in improv class, which is don't let the conversation end. And that is involved with perhaps asking questions or moving things along, but certainly not closing the door completely and saying no, or I don't think so, or any form that shuts someone down. If you don't have time to address it, then you say, can I get back to you? However, the best thing is to stop and listen and thoughtfully not say no. You may not have all the information, so you may be asking questions, and you may be sharing maybe your own experience and letting them say, well, you know, that doesn't really apply to my situation. And so it helps not only the asker perfect their question, but the answerer or the person who helps you is supposed to help you explore the question.
So what type of questions might you ask?
I might ask a question about, is that in the context of work? Is this as your role as an instructor? Is this, are you the boss in this situation? What is it you're trying to accomplish at the end of the day? And I have these three favorite words, which are, and then what? So often people say, don't ask me a question unless you have a solution. Yeah, that's nice. But if you have someone who's, completely innocently asking the question, then you definitely want to say, even possibly use the technique of 5 whys or 3 whys, where you simply ask, well, why is that? Or why does this need to be answered? Because you're actually helping the asker get down to what their question really is.
That's a great technique too.
It is helpful.
And I've seen it work many times.
And Keith, as a thought leader and a leader and former chair of the NIGP board, did these things happen to you where you had questions or comments and, maybe your first reaction was going to be no, but how did you manage that?
Well, important thing was when you're in that type of a leadership role, I believe you need to understand the motive of the individual asking the question too, because sometimes they had agendas, believe it or not. And you want to make sure nobody's trying to trap you, which usually wasn't the case. You usually wanted your knowledge. But you need to understand that every answer in a position like that has consequences. And that's something that's very important to remember. And it's a skill that you basically obtain not overnight, but after some great deal of experience. How important is it to be non-judgmental when you're working with a mentee?
It is important for you and for the mentee in all things to not be judgmental, except at the minimum that you need to discern what's going on.
Right.
You want to be a safe zone when it comes to people asking questions, because they may be a little bit shy about their part in it or whatever. And if you're really going to be effective, you're going to help them become fully aware so you can become fully aware and look at it as an opportunity versus a sentence, right? No, you did that wrong and now you should go away.
Well, don't judge, but educate for the future.
Yes.
Well, I think we are all in the know now after our little discussion today, and it's been very productive. And Barb, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate being able to have you here to talk with. You've been a friend for many years, and
we won't say how many, but it's always a pleasure to work with you, Keith.
Yeah, so I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody who's watching today, and remind everybody we'll be back next month with another Way to Grow segment. And this is Radio NIGP.
Hey, y'all, I'm back with another quick story about the foolish things that people do. Last month, I promised you a story from Richland County, South Carolina, where the county council woman, Dolly Myers, actually was indicted a couple years back on a loss of about $24,000 that she had stolen through using her P card and with a campaign funds and other things that she got caught in lies about. In this story, Councilwoman Myers actually used her P card to take trips like to Greece. She was supposed to be in Texas. She went to Detroit. She went to New Jersey because she had to go see Magic Johnson about some business. Doesn't the story doesn't say whether or not she actually saw Magic Johnson, but she was going to go see Magic Johnson about some business that she didn't necessarily disclose. So maybe it has something to do with the county. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was a scavenger hunt. I don't know. It's just a lot of foolishness. What ended up happening with her was that she was indicted. She actually got arrested, turned herself in and got arrested. And then the argument became, how could this happen? So how could it happen? The sheriff's department said that this case was unnecessarily hard because the county just kept loose records. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. They said that compared to other people's P-card records, the county just wasn't as forceful with what they do. Now, I'll tell you for myself, for the time that I was a P-card administrator for the state of South Carolina, the requirements are tight. However, when we have counties and locals and even K-12s, that oversight is not so much seen at the state level. It is a state contract, but they just enjoy usage of the contract. So what can we do? My big question is this: should council people have P-cards? The policy in South Carolina is that, or the law in South Carolina is that you have to be employed in order to get a card. And that's what the P-card manual says. But again, because this is a county and not a state, they have a little more flexibility. Are council people employed by the entities they serve or represent in? I don't know. That's a good question. I think the answer, though, is that people at that level probably should not have P cards, because who is going to go to the council and say you're abusing your P cards, right? So if someone in the office next door is abusing P card, it gets suspended. If you turn off a councilwoman's card, you might get suspended. And so it creates that conflict that prevents people from doing their jobs. And it gives you that opportunity or motivation not to say no, right? Because that's what we're talking about when we don't say no. And speaking of that, this councilwoman actually said that, yes, I spent it, but you know what? They didn't stop. She had a good point. But again, most people like paying bills, and they're not going to just go out and put themselves on the line when it comes to ethical dilemmas with their represented officials. So it's something to think about. For those of you who manage P-card programs, I'm just going to strongly encourage that you take a good look at who has cards and in what positions, and maybe coming up with different plans. Maybe the elected officials don't have cards, but their admins do. Maybe you develop travel policies that make it easy for them to travel, but also keep those controls in place. And maybe you procurement people take the time to teach your council people about procurement and P cards and problems, and share these articles with them so that they know. I mean, I think that was one of the most profound things that I heard Keith Ashby say in an interview that he did with Darren Matthews, is that when we get new council people, we call them in, we have discussions about procurement. Great idea, because sometimes you just don't know, right? And why should elected officials know exactly how procurement works? It's an interesting story. Like I said, Richland County Council, Richland County, South Carolina. Her name is Dolly Myers. Go out and look for these articles. They're very interesting. I collect these articles because I like to keep an arsenal to share with my colleagues, and here at where I work, and also with you all. And also as a reminder that I might look good in, what are we calling this? We're calling this Bulldog Garnet. I might look good in Bulldog Garnet, but I'll never, ever look good in orange. Thank you.
Hello, friends. I hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Radio NIGP. And if I were to ask you, I hope the answer would not be, no, I didn't. I hope it'd be, I did, and it gave me a lot to think about. So in case you haven't figured out, Yes, in our profession, we have to say no. Sometimes it's very important to say no, especially if the actions that are going to be taken are illegal or immoral or unethical. We have no choice but to say no. But what we can do best is not necessarily just saying no, but actually offering those options. Or when it's needed, point to the potential outcome or the impact as a result of what that decision could be, right? Maybe it's a protest. Maybe it's being above the fold in the newspaper. Or worse yet, wearing orange and maybe picking up trash on the side of the road. I don't know, but it can be challenging sometimes. But, if I'm having my yummy cookie here and you say, oh, that cookie looks great, can I have a bite? Now I have an option. I can say, absolutely not. It's my cookie and I'm going to eat it. Or I can say, sure. But you might want to know, I've licked it, but you can have it, right? Sometimes it's better to have options. Can I serve on the evaluation panel for this RFP even though my brother's company submitted an offer? Well, you can, but what's that perception going to be if your brother wins that award? Are people going to think it's fair? Are people going to look at you and trust you and your judgment? Probably not. How about, can I accept tickets from the supplier that wants me to join him at the Super Bowl? Well, you could, but again, do you want to read about that in the paper? I don't know, probably not. Think about the consequences if you do say yes. We protect the process by following the values and guiding principles that are taught by NIGP. We have to be open, fair, and transparent in everything that we do. So think about that. Would you want that blasted on social media? Would you want that in the newspaper? Would you want that brought up in a protest hearing? So when you think about it that way, absolutely not. But when you help people get to that understanding without just, no, you can't. No, you can't have my cookie. No, you can't do this. Give me my option. Sure, you can, but let's walk this out a little bit. Ponder what would happen if we didn't step up, if we didn't pull up our big boy pants or our big girl pants and make a stand in those cases to protect our end users. If we were not that, hello, small voice from the wilderness being their conscience, the Jiminy Cricket, if you will, to keep them on the right path and to guide them if something wasn't right. What would that world be? Ooh, I don't want to think about it. We should totally use professional judgment, sprinkled with a little bit of professional courtesy, and say no with respect when it's needed. But as the saying goes, you may not like me now, you may not like my message, but you will love me later. And that's a promise. Have a great day, friends. And remember, bless your heart. It's Valentine's. Share that love with those you know. Bye, friends.
Just say no.